And so why do you think life cycle marketing, whether it's pre-sales or post-sales, why do you think it's having a moment right now? And is it just a moment?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the moment that it's having right now is kind of obvious when you think about market conditions at the moment, right? Where every business, no matter industry, is squeezed, right? Squeezed on margin. And ultimately, we're seeing a lot of layoffs because of it. We're also seeing a lot of opportunity because of it as well. Um, and in any business, they're looking at every single stage of their customer's journey, their partner's journey, and identifying every mechanism they can turn to drive revenue. So I think that the moment is very logical when you think about the overarching market conditions that we're living in right now. And because of that, like I don't think it's really a moment, right? Because as businesses look to drive revenue more at the holistic users and customers journey, I think that those practices will remain for the long term, right? What's the value that we're constantly driving, and the best information we can gather to make sure we're driving users to the right transactions, the right value moments as frequently as possible, is ingesting a ton of their behavioral data, right? And then using lifecycle as a mechanism for like next best action strategy. So you checked out this feature. Here are all the templates you could possibly need to get the most out of that feature, right? Or you added one team member, you should add more, right? So we're looking at that behavioral data and almost considering our relationship with the customer and the user as a lifecycle marketer, kind of like what a marketplace platform would need.
Triggers used to be, all timing based, so 3 days or 7 days or 12 days. Now people are shifting behavioral. It sounds like, nirvana, but and the pros are obvious, but what are the cons of doing behavioral based triggering?
So there's a combination of linear based strategies and then behavior based strategies. So the best way to think about the content within each of those buckets is linear is everyone needs to know. Now, you should improve that content through use case data, through personalization data that you have about the user. And the behavioral things are only relevant for a one-to-one experience, right? So it's one thing a user did or didn't do that's super relevant to them that'll ultimately drive them down like the golden path journey that we're aiming to drive each user through to activation. Now, what are the cons of behavioral based strategies? Over communication is like the one, right? So it's really important to map the life cycle program holistically and look at how some of the behavior based communications could potentially land. Like the way that you see this all the time is, let's say you log out of a platform and you log back in 30 days later. Well, there's like a queue of 5 to 10 in-app notifications that just keep popping up over and over and over again because there's no context around the communication queue for that individual user. So you can use global settings and lifecycle platforms to manage this really well, but you'd be shocked at how many teams just kind of like build something off of an idea and never actually consider the journey of the customer, the journey of the user, of how they could potentially interact with it.
So who are some of the companies that you've done audits of? Have you heard from those companies? And then I'll ask you a follow-up question.
Yeah, yeah. So my team and I have spent like hundreds of hours
Yeah.
auditing some really impressive companies, and I just want to see like what's the top 1%
What are big
potentially
boys
doing out
do?
there
Yeah.
that I could steal, right? And then as I realized, as I started to document that, I was like, oh my gosh, other people might want this. So we've audited Slack, Notion, Clay, Apollo, Lovable, Canva, Calendly, and Monday.com.
So let's say I'm a customer lifecycle marketer, apply for a job, interview, and someone says, "What's the first thing you're going to do?" Would you say an audit? And if so, how would you go about that audit for your own company?
Yeah, yeah, I like that question. And it's so common. Like often when we start working with new clients and we're working with like a lot of VPs of marketing and heads of growth and things like that, and they get in the room and they see the macro of the marketing programs, right? And they just see that, oh, life cycle is not getting enough attention, and they bring us in to first identify what's even there, like what's even there, what are the low hanging fruit items that we really need to change as fast as possible and look at addressing. So we build an overarching map of all the programs that are in place specifically by the user's journey stages. So what stage in their journey are they, and where does the campaign fit appropriately? Then from there, we actually pull all of the content out of the marketing automation platforms. And at that stage, we're mapping the visualization. So we're identifying what do the delays look like? What is the actual performance and open rate, click-through rate, and then the post click-through on platform actions. And what's the content as well? So that gives us the opportunity to identify at the top level, where are big gaps? What part of the user's journey isn't being addressed? Where are big misses, right? Those are the gaps we're going to fill right away. And then in that second layer, we look at, okay, where is the highest and lowest performance taking place? And at the bottom layer, we're looking at content within, like what sort of messages work and don't work. And then that informs our, usually for us anyway, when we come into a new company, is our sprint strategy. So what do we implement in the next 1, 2, and 3 months to right the ship so that we can then scale over time from there? The last note I have that I'll leave the group with is, as lifecycle marketers, we can no longer really think of ourselves as just marketers, just content-oriented, customer-oriented marketers. That's obviously the North Star that qualifies us to be in this category, but we really need to start thinking of ourselves as engineers, lifecycle marketing engineers. How do we unearth the data, right? How do we identify the data pipelines in the MarTech stack that we really need to then create amazing lifecycle marketing content that is personalized to each individual customer or user's experience, so we can drive revenue results, right? So just a mindset shift, something that we're really changing inside of our organization and how we're helping a lot of our clients and customers is moving from traditional marketer into lifecycle marketing, engineering, and orchestration.
I think companies are having trouble finding people who can meld that too, that customer advocacy, customer mentality, customer empathy, customer experience with demand gen, data, orchestration. But if you've got that person, hold on to them. And if you are that person, you will get a job.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's the way that everything's heading, and it's like you mentioned, it's very logical. As lifecycle marketers and customer lifecycle marketers, we live in multiple worlds throughout the organizations that we work with, not just marketing.